Hello everyone, I am Dr. Sapkal here. The title for discussion today is the physiology of onset of labor. It is also known as Parturition Cascade of activation phase. This topic is little difficult to understand, hence our plan is we will discuss it with the flow chart on the board and then next we will discuss it with the slides. Okay? Let us discuss what is the scenario with the onset of labor pains in the hormonal pattern. So, you remember here first in this flow chart you write down here fetal corticotropin releasing hormone and this one is placental corticotropin releasing hormone. So, this corticotropin releasing hormone is from fetal side initially. Fetal hypothalamus secretes this one corticotropin releasing hormone and pituitary will get activated with ACTH is secreted, adrenocorticotropic hormone, just like in adult. This ACTH stimulates the fetal adrenals. And which hormone is produced from the fetal adrenals? DHEAS, DHEAS and also cortisol. So, you write down here cortisol. So, we have got DHEAS and cortisol, fetal DHEAS, fetal cortisol, this is fetal cortisol. Okay. This fetal cortisol in turn forms the placental corticotropin releasing hormone from the placenta. So, this one is the placenta I have drawn. This DHEAS which is produced from the adrenal gland produces estrogen from the placenta. So, there are two types of estrogens, E1, E2 gets converted into E2 and E3. E3 hormone is the most specific hormone of pregnancy. The formation of this E3 is 1000 times and this estradiol is E2, estriol is E3. E2 is the most common hormone of pregnancy. So, its production is say about 100 to 200 times. So, most specific is E3 and most common is E2 hormone in pregnancy. In these cases, this estrogen in turn stimulates the maternal pituitary and fetal pituitary also to produce and placenta to produce uterus, placenta to produce oxytocin. Okay. Now, let us pay attention to this cortisol. This cortisol stimulates to release placental corticotropin releasing hormone from the placenta. Okay. This placental corticotropin hormone causes its effect. This is the uterus I have drawn here. It affects the amnion and deciduum also for the production of prostaglandins and which in turn also is effective over the cortisol and also helps for the formation of the estrogen. So, it is returned in the form of. So, this placental CRH is very important in pregnancy. It helps for the formation of the cortisol also, for the formation of the estrogen and oxytocin also, and it affects the uterus and it causes production of prostaglandins. Prostaglandins and oxytocins, they are uterotonics, means what? They cause uterine contraction. Now, what are the effects of this placental corticotropin releasing hormone over the uterus? It increases production of the cap. These are the receptors over the surface of the uterus. So, this placental CRH increases caps on the surface of the uterus. They are receptors of the estrogen, they are increased, oxytocin receptors are also increased, and stretch receptors are also increased. So, these 2-3 caps are increased on the surface of the uterus. Next, it causes the fall in the progesterone receptors. Caps are decreased. So, there is fall in the progesterone receptor caps. Caps of stretch receptors, estrogen receptors and oxytocin receptors, they are in plenty with the effect of CRH. Next action is on myometrial cells, which causes influx of extracellular calcium into the cell and increases intracellular calcium content. So, intracellular calcium content also increases. Third way, it increases gaps junction, means there are tunnels, protein tunnels in between the myometrial cells. These gap junctions are increased to transfer the impulses from the outside to the inside of the cells. The cortisol and this CRH, placental CRH, also is effective over the amnion to release prostaglandin E, E2, and on decidua it causes release of prostaglandin F2 alpha. As such, these prostaglandins are stored in the amnion and decidia in the form of glycerophospholipids. Okay. So, with this, what are the uterotonics we have obtained here? One is oxytocin and the other is prostaglandin. These two are the uterotonics which makes the uterus sensitive also, and it makes the uterus to contract. So, they increase the uterine contractions. Next we will learn little bit of uterus, cervix here first. So, initially there is ripening of the cervix, and on the uterus there is formation of the lower uterine segment in the activation phase of labor. What is that activation phase? We will discuss it later on. This dermatin sulfate is there in the stroma of the cervix, dermatin sulfate. It is used for the formation of this arachidonic acid. And there is collagenase activation. Which digest the collagen fibers in the cervix stroma and cause ripening of the cervix. So, this results into ripening of the cervix. Then with the labor pains, onset of labor pains and uterotonic effect, there is dilatation of cervix. So, initially there is ripening of the cervix. What is the effect over the uterus? Here in these cases, glycerophospholipids is the storage form of hyaluronic acid. there is activation of this phospholipase enzyme. Which results in the production of prostaglandins in excess. So, in the uterus, this hyaluronic acid is stored in the form of glycerophospholipids. These glycerophospholipids are digested by this phospholipase activation. With this enzyme, there is activation of this glycerophospholipids activation and formation of prostaglandins. So, it results in the formation of the prostaglandin, and uterine contractions are there which produce the effacement of the cervix and formation of lower uterine segment in priming gravida. Relaxin hormone also help for the formation of lower uterine segment. This is how the parturition cascade, hormonal cascade occurs for the onset of labor pains. Now, let us discuss this in detail with the help of slides. During this session, I will describe the physiology of onset of labor, but for this purpose you need to understand certain short forms which are used in the flow chart. Okay. So, what are they? Fetal CRH means it is fetal corticotropin releasing hormone, from the, it is from the hypothalamus. ACTH, it is adrenocorticotropic hormone. Estrogen and cortisol, you understand. Okay. About this, placental CRH is PLCRH, and this hormone produces prostaglandin also in interleukin 6 and 8. These are they which has got inflammatory reaction. Okay. ACTH is adrenocorticotropic hormone. It is most common. It produces estrogen. DHES, dehydroepiandrostenedione, in the placenta it produces E3, that is E2, and specific of pregnancy E3 also. CAPS. So, what do you understand by CAPS? Contraction associated proteins. They are the receptors of estrogen, receptors of progesterone, receptors of oxytocin, and also receptors of prostaglandins also. Connexin is connexin 43. It is a gap junction. It is a protein in the cell myometrium. It forms the tunnel to transfer the impulses from one side to the other. Matrix metalloproteases means MMP. It is seen in the cervix. Then this glycose aminoglycans, it is also known as GAGs. It is in the cervix. Inflammatory cells, you know, they are cytokines, interleukin 8 seen in the cervix. So, let us begin with this physiology of labor. As such, pregnancy is a quiescent phase because of progesterone dominance. Labor is estrogen dominance condition. Pregnancy is progesterone dominance. There cervix is soft with the Hagar sign we elicit made out, then the cervix is closed also. These estrogen receptors are there, but they are suppressed by the progesterone throughout the pregnancy. Progesterone is secreted by the corpus luteum initially till 10 to 12 weeks. Later on, its function is taken over by the placenta. So, placenta produces the progesterone hormone. Next phase is the activation phase. This is very important phase. There is activation of myometrium, means it gets sensitized for the stimulus, and in this condition during labor there is estrogen dominance. With the onset of labor pains there is estrogen dominance. and parturition cascade, it is also known as this all sequence of events is known as parturition cascade. Sometimes this terminology is used in the MCQs. So, you remember it is here parturition cascade. It results into formation of lower uterine segment, cervical wrappering and activation of the myometrium for the uterine contraction. This phase, activation phase, is seen say about approximately 8 weeks prior to the onset of true labor pain. So, in the activation phase there is a chance of sometimes the patient may report with the false labor pains also. Next, the third phase is the stimulation phase, where there is stimulation of myometrium and onset of true labor pain. This stimulation phase is due to uterotonics like oxytocin, prostaglandin E2 and prostaglandin F2 alpha. In the postnatal period after delivery of the fetus and the placenta, there is involution phase of the uterus, where the uterus this phase is of 6 weeks, where the uterus comes back to its normal size after delivery. So, involution phase is seen in the postnatal period. This is how the sequence of events occur in pregnancy, quiescent phase, 8 weeks prior to labor, activation phase, during labor, stimulation phase, in postnatal period, involution phase. So, what is this activation phase? It is seen 2 weeks before. It is due to effect of progesterone, prostacyclin, relaxin hormone, nitric oxide levels are also reduced before labor and parathyroid related peptides. These are the hormones which are responsible for the activation phase. These hormones, there is cessation effect, cessation of this inhibitory effect of these hormones in the activation phase. There are certain changes in the uterus in this activation phase, means what? The contractility of the uterus increases, it becomes more sensitive to the uterotonics, and that means the responsiveness is also increased with this. The important change is due to increase in the caps, means these are the receptors of oxytocin, prostaglandin and increase in the gap junction. The name of this gap junction is connexin 43. It is a protein in the myometrial cells. Thus, initially there is myometrium activation followed by stimulation of uterus with the uterotonics, oxytocin and prostaglandin and onset of uterine contractions or labor pains. During pregnancy, the uterus is in the quiescent phase. Actually, this fetal genome, it determines how much should be the growth of the fetus, stretching of the uterus and activation of myometrium. Activation of fetal HPA axis means fetal, hypothalamus, pituitary and adrenal axis is initiated in this activation phase. Here fetal hypothalamus will produce fetal CRH. Fetal adrenocorticotropin releasing hormone is there, which is released by the pituitary, and adrenals they produce DHES and cortisol. So, this adrenocorticotropic hormone is released from the pituitary. This should be the pituitary instead of hypothalamus. Okay. DHEA and 16-OH-DHEA produced by the fetal adrenal glands, they increase the placental production of this E2 and E3 estrogen. E2 is produced from DHEA and from 16-OH-DHEA, E3 hormone is produced. So, total estrogen content increases in the activation phase. This cortisol, which is produced by the adrenal glands, also stimulates formation of the placental CRH. Cortisol also stimulates myometrium for the synthesis of prostaglandins. This is the flow chart I had drawn here. Try to understand it carefully. Okay. Fetal hypothalamus releases fetal CRH. Over the pituitary, ACTH is released from the pituitary. It causes adrenal secretion of DHES and cortisol. So, these two hormones are secreted by adrenal. One is DHES and second is cortisol. DHES produces estrogen E2, estradiol, and 16-OH DHES produces, synthesizes E3 or estriol in the placenta. So, the estrogen is produced in the placenta. Okay. Now, what is the effect of this cortisol level? This fetal cortisol stimulates, forms the production of placental CRH also, which in turn again stimulates the formation of fetal cortisol. This placental CRH again helps for the formation of the estrogen from the DHES. So, like that this cycle is completed. So, you remember here, you first remember fetal CRH, then talk about placental CRH. This placental CRH is very much helping in the for the activation phase. What happens here? This placental CRH increases the receptors of oxytocin, estrogen and stretch receptors over the uterus, and they decrease the progesterone receptors, so that the effect of progesterone is less and estrogen is more. So, during labor there is estrogen dominance, during pregnancy there is progesterone dominance. This is how it causes the initiation of uterine contraction in the activation phase with the effect of estrogen hormone. This placental CRH is produced by the placenta. It also produces interleukin 6 and 8 and prostaglandin F2 alpha from the decidua and prostaglandin E2 from the amnion of the uterine cavity. These uterotonics, oxytocin, it increases the intracellular level of calcium, estrogen, and it helps for the stimulation of the oxytocin, contraction of the myometrial cells. Oxytocin helps. Estrogen, we understood, estrogen is produced by the placenta, DHES gets converted into E2, rises 200 times, 16-OH DHES gets converted into E3 in the fetal liver. E2 formation is in the placenta, E3 formation is in the fetal liver, which increases 1000 times, and it is specific of pregnancy. You may remember in cases of screening in pregnancy, we take help of this estriol, serum estriol levels to predict the growth of the fetus in IUGR cases. Estrogen stimulates the oxytocin production from the mother pituitary and fetal pituitary also, and there is increase in the oxytocin receptors in the myometrium due to increased production of oxytocin. With the onset of labor, this excess of oxytocin is expressed at the chorion also and decidual space. What is the role of this placental CRH? It causes onset of uterine contraction. 48 hours prior to the labor, CRH increases, CRH cause increased levels of CAPS. These are the receptors of estrogen, oxytocin and stretch receptors. Receptors of progesterone, they fall. They stimulate this CRH, also stimulates the gap junction. The increase in the gap junction proteins removes the refractoriness of myometrium, and thus it becomes sensitive to the uterotonics. Prostaglandins are activated locally, they are locally present in the uterus, amnion, chorion and deciduum. Things like trauma to the uterus or decidua, like in traumatic PPH and all, stretching of the cervix, amnion and distension of the uterus in twin pregnancy, hydramnios and local inflammatory reaction, this encourages production of prostaglandin. and patient goes into the labor in these cases. Glycerophospholipids are stored in the amnion, chorion and ascidia. So, in the form of prostaglandins are stored in the form of glycerophospholipids. Phospholipase A2 cyclooxygenase enzymes, they convert these glycerophospholipids into free arachidonic acid, and from there the prostaglandin synthetase helps for the formation of prostaglandins from free arachidonic acid. What are the prostaglandins which are formed? Prostaglandin F2 alpha is a uterotonic, prostaglandin E2 helps for the ripening of the cervix, prostaglandin I2 and thromboxane A2 are also formed which help for the labor pains, onset of labor pains. Now, these uterotonics which are formed like oxytocin and prostaglandin. The placental CRH stimulates the gap junctions, and for the transport of this calcium and all ions channels they are formed. So, oxytocin and prostaglandins, they are uterotonics, they are increased 48 hours prior to the onset of true labor pains. These oxytonics and prostaglandin, they cause sudden influx of intracellular calcium from extracellular compartment. This calcium binds with the protein calmodulin and calcium activated calmodulin CAM binds with the myosin fibers, myosin light chain kinase. Phosphorylation of this myosin, with the effect of this phosphorylation of this myosin, actin myosin slide over each other and there results in the shortening of the myelocyte which cause myometrial contraction. So, this is how the prostaglandins are effective in causing the prostaglandins and oxytocin also. They are effective causing myometrial contraction with the onset of labor pains, true labor pains I am talking of. So, in short, oxytocin works by increasing intracellular calcium level by influx of extracellular calcium into the intracellular compartment. This calcium is activated, forms calcium activated calmodulin, this is a protein. CACM binds with the myosin light chain kinase, phosphorylation of this myosin, actin myosin slide over each other, shortening of myosin and contraction of myometrium. Uterotonics prostaglandin E2 and F2 alpha works. Prostaglandin, this works by increasing, oxytocin works by increasing calcium levels, intracellular calcium level. However, uterotonic, this prostaglandin E2 and F2 alpha work by activating L-type calcium channels in the cells. They decrease the CAMP, cyclic AMP and cyclic GMP, which cause contraction of the myometrium. This is how there is effective myometrial contraction with the labor pains. The process where there is decrease of intracellular calcium level is seen with the relaxation phase, like in pregnancy also. There increasing levels of cyclic AMP and beta receptor agonists are effective in these cases. Though increasing levels of cyclic AMP, prostacyclins, relaxin, nitric oxide, they help for the relaxation of uterus. Calcium channel blockers are used as a tocolytic to block the influx of the calcium into the cell. Magnesium is also used, which also blocks the calcium channels, and endothelium is used to decrease the influx of calcium. So, this is how the tocolytics are effective in causing the relaxation of uterus. So, in short, at the end, what are the changes as a result of activation phase? In the activation phase, mother gets relieved of this respiratory discomfort due to descent of the height of the uterus from the xiphisternum, and the flanks they become bulging. This sensation is known as lightning sensation, and it is a welcome sign at term 15 days before expected date of delivery. Shelf sign is also seen in multigravida. This one, it results due to this lightning results due to stretching or stretching of the lower uterine segment or lower part of the uterus. Lower uterine segment forms from the effacement of the isthmus of the cervix, as the fibers are circular. So, the muscle fibers in the lower uterine segment are circular and they stretch with the formation of lower uterine segment. This lower uterine segment is also formed due to descent of the head or engagement of the head at term, and it is also effective by the relaxing hormone. There is a ripening of the cervix, increase in the water content of the cervix, it becomes soft and thin out. Activation phase, there is chance of false labor pains also due to, this is due to increased responsiveness of myometrium to prostaglandin in this phase. That is how we understood that activation phase is important prior to the onset of the labor, and that is how true labor pains, they result with these changes in the hormonal. This is how the parturition cascade we have discussed today. Thanks for patient hearing.